Good evening. Today I'm going to briefly discuss the major findings of my literature review on the evolution of executive power in U.S. foreign policy. Early literature highlights the executive branch as the primary authority over American foreign policy, especially after World War II and throughout the Cold War. Its dominance is framed as both natural and necessary. Together, Dean and Billington argue that U.S. leadership is essential for global stability, and both present external threats like Soviet expansion as justification for strong presidential action. Peterson reinforces their conclusions by adding a structural explanation. The presidency is institutionally designed for rapid decision making, while Congress is slow and deliberative. These authors collectively support a strong executive model grounded in realist assumptions. Now, modern scholarship begins to challenge that consensus. Trar and Quill agree that domestic political incentives, not just external threats, shape presidential behavior. Trar frames this as rational political strategy, while Quill provides empirical evidence that domestic turmoil increases unilateral presidential action. Their work complements each other, but also contradicts earlier authors by suggesting that executive power may be used for political advantage rather than national security. The literature also shows that the tools of foreign policy have evolved alongside this expanding executive power. Bose argues that the Bush Doctrine formalized unilateral preemptive action after 9/11, reinforcing the strong executive model described by earlier scholars. Meyer and Sitaraman extend this by showing how economic coercion, sanctions, export controls, and financial restrictions have become a powerful presidential tool that often bypasses congressional review. Cornut and his colleagues add that social media enabled President Trump to conduct diplomacy in a highly personalized and impulsive way. These authors collectively agree that the executive power has not only expanded, but also diversified. However, there is a growing body of research that directly contradicts the assumption that strong executive action produces stability. Thrall and Gopner argue that the War on Terror increased instability, directly challenging the logic of Bush Doctrine and the containment mindset that Billington had earlier described. Now, Fontenelle and Chattery, they go even further, arguing that unilateral U.S. leadership cannot address borderless threats like climate change and pandemics. And Chetnier and Castelli, they contradict military-centric assumptions altogether by demonstrating that economic development, not force, is a more reliable path to peace. Together, these modern authors form a cohesive counterargument. Executive-centric foreign policy may undermine the stability that it claims to protect. Now, across this literature, scholars use a range of research methods and approaches. Early works rely on historical analysis to explain how authority expanded, while others use institutional analysis to examine how the U.S. political system structurally empowers the presidency. More recent studies use rational choice models and quantitative methods to link domestic pressures to behavior. Communication scholars analyze how digital platforms reshape diplomacy. Together, these methods create an understanding of how executive power developed and why it persists. It's also important to acknowledge the limitations of this research. Much of the literature focuses heavily on U.S. actions without incorporating perspectives from other states or international institutions. Several studies rely on historical or case-based analysis, which can limit generalizability. Also, there is limited empirical research on how emerging technologies and strategic competition will reshape executive power down the line. To address these gaps, future research could use a mixed methods design. Through historical or interpretive analysis, one could track how presidents use various tools across different periods of public opinion, paired with qualitative case studies to capture reasoning behind executive decisions altogether. Taken together, the literature reviews a clear evolution from early support for strong executive action grounded in realist theory to modern critiques that call for restraint, cooperation, and alternative tools of statecraft. In identifying this shift, I have established a new workable research question. How do domestic political pressures and public opinion influence the likelihood that U.S. presidents will continue to bypass Congress when using economic or military tools of foreign policy? Thank you.